Hey, this is Jamie with Stonemaier Games, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about my 9, not 10, usually I have 10, but my 9 favorite tutorials in tabletop games. And by tutorials, I specifically mean games that have like games that you can just open the box and start playing, and the game teaches you as you are actually taking turns in the game and actually playing along. So I don't mean tutorial missions. I don't mean basic missions in games where you still have to learn the rules up front. I'm talking about really you open the box and you start playing because the game teaches you out of the box. I'll talk about pros and cons of this throughout the discussion because it's pretty difficult to pull off, and I would almost say even rarely a good idea to try it. Because it can take a lot of work. But I admire games that pulled this off. And we have a few at some of our games where we tried to do it. I'll mention those among the 9. There are a bunch of games mentioned by our ambassadors who contribute to these lists ambassadors mentioned that these games have tutorials, but I either have played these games and didn't use the tutorial to learn how to play, maybe someone else taught me, or I haven't played the games at all. And I say that because I am not entirely sure that all of these games fit into this category of tutorial as I've defined it today. It is possible that these games just have kind of maybe a simplified tutorial setup or starting mission or something like that, but they don't actually walk you through. You can't just open the box and start playing, which is the goal of these tutorials that I'm describing here. Anyway, the games mentioned by ambassadors for that purpose are Tidal Blades, XCom, Robinson Crusoe, Galaxy Truckers, Oath, Tainted Grail, Legends of Andor, Aeon's End, Krosmaster Arena, Micro Macro Crime City, Marvel Champions, Tiny Towns, My City, Stuffed Fables, Deckscape, The Initiative, Princess Bride Adventure Book Game, This War of Mine, Star Wars Imperial Assault, and Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. Again, I've played over half the games on that list, but just not the tutorial. So I don't know if it is truly a tutorial by the definition that I'm using today. But let's jump into those that I have used, that I have played. And some of them even fudge this definition a little bit, but I'll make sense of it in a second. At number 9 on the list is Root. And in Root, this is a bit of a fudge here, because in Root, you do have to learn the rules of the game to understand how to play. However, Root does a really good job of creating tutorials for each of the different asymmetric factions in the game. Root is built around that premise that it is a very asymmetric game and that every faction is different. And every faction has a couple different components that help you play. One is a player mat that you use whenever you play Root. That isn't really a tutorial, but it really walks you through every turn. So you never have to remember anything. The player mat walks you through every aspect of every turn. There's also a little set of cards that explains how to play with that faction, just the rules of how to play as you're taking turns. So it gives you a few things to do on the first few turns of the game as you play. And it also presents ideas that you want to think about as you look at other players in the game. So it's not just walking you through the first few turns. It's also describing general things that you want to start to think about as you take those turns. It's been a little while since I played one of these tutorials for Root, but I remember having a very good experience with it. It really helped me understand how that faction worked. And really the rules beyond each faction for the game are so simple that they fit in pretty seamlessly with the mini tutorials for each faction. So that's why Root is my number 9 game on this list. And number 8 is one of our games, the Stonemaier Games, and that is Wingspan. The very original version of Wingspan did not have what I'm going to talk about today, which is the Swift Start Guide. But we ended up adding it pretty soon after that because we realized how many birders, non-gamer birders, were trying Wingspan and were entering the board game hobby for the first time through this game. And we were like, oh no, like we want people to actually play this game, not just look through the cards. Not to discredit any birder who wanted to give it a try, but for a birder who had never played a modern game before, it is a lot to figure out. And so we included these Swift Start Guides. So the Swift Start Guide, there are 4 of them in the game. Even though Wingspan's a 5-player game, we included 4 of these because that's what we could figure out. And each of these is a unique player mat that really just walks you through the first 5 turns of the game. First 4 turns and then 5 games, it kind of lets you go. And in addition to walking you through those turns and explaining how they work, so it says something like this: for turn 1, play the Broadwing Hawk in your forest. Place your action cube in the player bird row at the top of your player mat above the first column where cards can go. So it really visually and here in words, it explains exactly what you're doing. There's italicized text to explain what it means when you do that. And paired with each of these mats is a unique set of bird cards that are specifically for the purpose of this pack. So for this player, for player 1, you'll get the American Redstart, the Broadwing Hawk, and 3 food tokens. So it's instead of doing a regular setup, it is telling you these are the things that you're starting with for this tutorial game, tutorial round. And one of my favorite things about this, not only is it super easy to teach the game with this in hand, or even if you're a master of Wingspan, if you really know how to play, but you're inviting a new player into the game, rather than trying to explain all the rules to them, all you just need to do is give them one of these mats. You can play normally as you want. You don't have to. You don't have to also play the tutorial. You can just give them a tutorial. The Swift Start guide, you give them these cards, which are marked in the corners of the game, so they're easy to find even if after you played Wingspan a lot, because you can eventually shuffle these cards just into the deck of normal board cards. You can just give this to a new player, and they can play along and get an idea of how the different actions in the game works, and then the game just lets them go. And so it makes the burden of teaching someone a lot easier. Not that it's always a burden, but it can be a little bit if you just want to sit down and play Wingspan. It makes that a lot easier. It makes the onboarding experience a lot more welcoming for a new player. And it is a viable way to start the game. Elizabeth designed this so that you are not at a disadvantage after you use a Swift Start guide, because after turn 4, it releases you to the wilds and it lets you take turns as you wish. And so it's kind of set you up to play the game normally. You don't have to then reset and play a different game. It is a full tutorial walkthrough that then lets you make choices on your own. I am really impressed by what Elizabeth created here, and that what we ended up publishing for Wingspan. The reason that it's a little bit lower on this list is that someone at the table still needs to know the rules to Wingspan. You cannot just open up the box and start playing. There needs to be one player who still learns it, but every other player can just use the Swift Start guide. That's why I put it a little bit lower on the list at number 8. And number 7, I put another game of ours. I didn't want to put any of our games up too high on the list, although I am pretty happy with how Charterstone turned out. In Charterstone, let me get the box over here. I designed Charterstone around the idea that you could open the box and start playing. This is a village building legacy game where from game to game you're adding more and more stuff to the game. And not just on a game-to-game basis, but also how you unlock stuff during each individual game. But I really wanted you to just sit down and be able to start playing the game. And so there's no punch boards that you need to punch when you open the game. There's metal coins instead, so you don't have to punch out a bunch of coins. You literally can open the box and start playing. And paired with the tutorial on the front page of the rulebook is instructions on what to do exactly when you open the box. So it says, like, open up the cards and take them out of the shrink wrap, check to make sure that you have all the cards there, but don't actually look at the cards in detail. It does say to read through the Chronicle. I'm not going to show you this right now, but inside the rulebook, when you open it for the first time, are a few rules. I think there's like maybe 5 or 6 cards worth of rules. And I say cards, I'll just flash this to the camera, you won't be able to read it. But each of the rules are broken down into card segments, because as you start to sit down and actually play the first game, the game unlocks sticker cards for you that become rules that you put in the rule book. So as you are playing that first game, and even at the end of the first game, I think actually even at the end of the second game, the game is unraveling rules for you, and you are reading those rules, you're learning them, and then you're sticking them in the rule book to be permanent from then on. For the most part, this works well. But I can't say that Charterstone's tutorial is perfect, because there are certain rules that you can miss if you use this method of teaching rules to players, having them unravel over the course of the game and having them using sticker cards to do that. Basically, I mean, if you miss a rule in Charterstone, and there's maybe a few crucial rules at the end of game 1 and I think maybe game 2, that if you miss it, or maybe you stop reading the rules card at the wrong time and it says, like, go ahead and unlock card 21 now, but you missed that, then you can be a little stuck and it's hard to go back and find what you missed. And so in general, I'm pretty happy with how it worked out, but we ended up pairing it with an FAQ that's included in the box now. It's also on our website if you buy an older version of Charterstone, but there's an FAQ that says, hey, at the end of game 1, read this. Read these points to make sure you didn't miss them. And I think the FAQ paired with the unraveling sticker card tutorial actually does work pretty well. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. And it's a method I'd love to see in another game. Another legacy game in particular, because that's where you use stickers. So that's Charterstone at number 6. Or number 7. At number 6 is Chronicles of Crime. My most recent experience with Chronicles of Crime was playing the 1400s version of it, and playing the tutorial mission. So it is a tutorial mission, but the app really walks you through everything that you need to do. You really can just turn on the app and start playing. You don't need to read through the rules. Maybe you could read through them really quickly if you wanted to, but the app really helps you walk through that tutorial mission. And it's just a really great tutorial mission. The reason I put that, and really I'll mention the next one, Unlock Star Wars. The Unlock Star Wars has a great tutorial mission as well. And again, it uses an app to walk you through it. The only reason I really haven't put these higher up on this list, and there's a little bit of prejudice here, but it's because they used an app. And the app works really well to walk you through the tutorial in both Chronicles of Crime and Unlock Star Wars. But I don't know. Maybe I should have put it higher, because they are tabletop games that just happen to use apps, and I do enjoy these games with the apps. But I wanted to, I guess, give a little bit more credit to designers that found a way to do a tutorial without using an app. Because using an app isn't all that far from just loading up a watch it played video or something like that. However, I know a lot of work went into these apps and these tutorials for Chronicles of Crime and Unlock Star Wars, so I still want to give them ample credit for what they are, and I highly recommend checking them out to see how you can do a tutorial with an app in both of those games. So that's number 6 and number 5, Chronicles of Crime, and then Unlock Star Wars. We're getting into some the top 4 are really impressive tutorials. And I'm going to start with, at number 4, Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. I'm going to be talking about this game soon. We are 3 games into it right now as I film this video, and we're about to enter Scenario 4. I have played Gloomhaven. It's been years since I played Gloomhaven, but I have played Gloomhaven, so I have a rough idea of how the game works, but it's been a long time. I played a lot of games since then, and so I was really curious to learn from this tutorial that I heard so many great things about, and it is an excellent tutorial. Really good tutorial in a variety of different ways. So basically, when you open the Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion box, you see this. Well, actually, before you even see this, I didn't open this copy. This is a friend's copy. Before you even see this, there's a guide of how to unpack the game and how to punch things, where do you put the tokens that you punch. So I really like that. That's like the top layer. That's advanced level stuff right there to tell players how to unravel the game when they open it, so that they can start with the tutorial. So that's the first level. Second level is that you just open the game and it says, this is the Learn to Play guide. It's a whole guide designed specifically just to teach you how to play Gloomhaven. And really, I mean, without exaggeration at all, you really do just open this and start playing. It walks you through the initial setup. It walks you through what the components mean. And it walks you through how to set up for the first scenario. And then you get to the first scenario, and it's ready. It's teaching you how to play the game as you play the game itself. However, in addition to that, it's letting you make choices throughout the game. So this is kind of a level up from the Wingspan method, although the Wingspan method only walks you through 4 turns and then it lets you free. In the Gloomhaven tutorial, it is letting you make choices throughout the tutorial as to what you want to do with your characters, how you want to level up, things like that. And so I really like that. I like that you have agency throughout this tutorial. You're actually making decisions rather than just reading through and just doing what the game tells you to do or what the tutorial tells you to do. This scenario guide is paired with let me flip to the first one, is paired with this book that so this is the first scenario in the Spiral book. Unlike the original Gloomhaven game, there aren't tiles. You actually use this book itself to lay out what you need to do. And this is awesome. Instead of having a separate book that tells you how to set up stuff on the mats, everything's just right here. It tells you where you can put your starting characters. It tells you where to put the different critters that you're going to be fighting against. Everything is here. And because it's a tutorial, it has these little dialogue boxes that remind you about stuff as you're playing it. So and actually there's another level to it too, but the tutorial guide paired with this and having these reminders on the board itself where your focus is while you're playing is amazing. And in addition to this, on each player has a starting set of cards. Each character does, and they look like regular Gloomhaven cards, but they're kind of buried in the box at this point, so I didn't get them out. But they have little blue boxes similar to this that just spell out what the abilities do. So a card might say like attack 2, range 3. And maybe you can remember what that means. Pretty soon you'll have a very good idea of what that means. But as you're learning it, instead of just expecting you to understand it, it has a little blue box below that on the tutorial version of the card that just spells it out exactly what that means. So you don't have to remember it. If you're trying to remember it while you're playing, you just read what's in the blue box. And eventually you get rid of those cards and get better cards that don't have the reminders on it. But the reminder text is really, really helpful. Really, the only reason that I'm not putting this higher on this list, because it is truly a brilliantly designed tutorial, is that there is still quite a bit of reading that you need to do during the tutorial itself, and even before you start playing. So it's not that you're opening the box and you're starting to play right away. It's more like you're opening the box and you're reading at least a few pages. I mean, I think it's like 6 pages. No, it's more than that. It's really, it's around 12 pages that you're reading before you actually start doing anything. And while it gets better after that first scenario, it's still, let's see, we're about to do scenario. It's still between 4 and 6 pages for each scenario before you can actually start playing it. We're about to enter scenario 4, so let's see how bad it is in scenario 4. It actually gets a lot more streamlined. Scenario 4, there's only really 2.5 pages that you need to read through before you can start playing. That's good that it gets better, but it's still a fair amount of stuff to read before you start playing when the idea is sit down, open this game, and just start doing stuff. But it gets very close. I'm really, really impressed. I'm learning a lot from the tutorial in Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. That's why it's my number 4. It is eclipsed, however, by number 3 on the list, and that is Fog of Love. Fog of Love is a romantic comedy board game with a lot of very clever Euro mechanisms. It's not, while there are lots of narrative moments in it, there's also a lot of great mechanisms in the game. And it has a fantastic tutorial deck of cards where you literally, as you open the box, you literally just draw the top card of the deck and it tells you exactly what to do. You don't need to look at the rulebook at all. That tutorial deck of cards will tell you what to do. And I actually enjoyed it so much that, and there's still choices that you can make throughout the tutorial as well. And so because of that, I think that's one of the reasons this elevates that method of giving players choices throughout the tutorial, is because I've actually used the tutorial in Fog of Love twice. I played it once, I used the tutorial to play through it, and then about a year later I wanted to play again, but I didn't remember the rules for it, and so we just played the tutorial again, and I played it with a different person, and it worked great. It worked well. Again, it was still felt like a game of Fog of Love because I was making choices, but the tutorial was walking me through how to play rather than having me reread the rulebook or really read it for the first time. So that deck of cards is excellent. The one downside that I want to mention to it, again, all these have a slight downside. I'm talking about, I'm not knocking on Fog of Love. I mentioned this from a designer perspective. The one downside, at least for me, when I do read through a rulebook, I have a visual sense of where to find things in the rulebook when I need to reference them later. Whereas if you have everything in a deck of cards, as Fog of Love does, you don't really have a visual sense of where to find a rule that you need to look for later. You then need to, essentially, if you want to commit Fog of Love to memory, you do need to go back and actually read the rulebook afterwards. And maybe that's just the way it has to be. It's not a long rulebook. It's not hard to do that. And it's a lot easier to read a rulebook after you've already played the game and after you already know how to play the game. But I think that is the one downside of using the cards-only method. There is no visual reminder, no visual cue that lets your brain go back and say, okay, I think I saw that in the middle of the rulebook, somewhere in the bottom right corner, there was a reminder about this thing, just how our brains work, or at least how my brain works. So that's why Fog of Love is number 3 on this list. At number 2 is one of the most recent, really close between this and the number 1 game. This is Sleeping Gods. Sleeping Gods has a fantastic tutorial mission. It's a pretty substantial book, similar to Gloomhaven, that you're going to use to start to play Sleeping Gods. But it walks you through everything that you need to do for the first mission of the game. Not the first mission, but to start the game, you just open the rulebook, this tutorial guide rulebook, and you start playing. And it tells you to do certain things, but you're also making choices as you're doing those things. Not really deep choices, but you are making choices as you learn to play through this book. And the one one really clever thing that maybe needs a little bit of work that I thought was really clever though in Sleeping Gods is that after you finish the tutorial guide, it kind of acknowledges that there are a few rules that it hasn't taught you yet. There are a few things that you're going to encounter that it has not gone into detail yet. It didn't try to cover everything in the game because it is a game about exploration and discovery. It didn't want to spoil everything for you in the tutorial. And in doing so, it kind of said, like, you don't quite know everything yet, but that's okay. When you encounter certain things, just look for them in the rulebook. You can easily find them in the rulebook, and that'll explain how to deal with those situations. And I really like that. I like that method. It didn't try to cram every little thing into the tutorial, but it gave us a really good idea of how to play, and so that we could start actually playing. I would say the one other way that could be elevated a little bit is to maybe mention what those things are if you want to look at those things and where you can find them in the rulebook, just so you know what you missed out on, and maybe you could skim through it. If you don't care that much about the discovery element, you could skim through and see what those things are or where to find them. That maybe would have been a little bit more helpful. But really, I mean, I had a very easy time opening Sleeping Gods. Punching everything was was a lot, but actually after I got that part done, I could just open that tutorial guide and we started playing, and it was wonderful first experience for Sleeping Gods. However, it was eclipsed by the number one. It's been a while since I played this, but I have raved about it ever since then. And the tutorial for Mechs vs. Minions is amazing. And I think one of the reasons it's so well designed is that Mechs vs. Minions is a League of Legends world game. And they really wanted to make this game accessible to video gamers, digital gamers, who aren't used to having to play, to read any rulebooks at all. So they wanted a tutorial, as you can see in many video games, that unravels how to play this tabletop game, Mechs vs. Minions. And that's a little tip that I've learned along the way. I don't play a lot of video games. I would say I watch more videos about video games than I actually play them. But when I do play them, or when I do watch videos about them, I like to watch how the tutorials work. Because a lot of the things that video games do in tutorials are really, really clever and could be carried over to tabletop games. And so I love that they did that while designing Mechs vs. Minions. The tutorial Mechs vs. Minions, really it's a little vague in my memory exactly how it works, but I just remember that we could open up the rulebook and start playing, and it walked us through how to do certain things, certain situations we encountered, and it just made learning that first game super, super easy. And really, above and beyond Sleeping Gods, I think we knew all the rules to the game at that point, because the only rules that we didn't know were those that were like scenario-based rules that we would encounter later. And when we encountered them, the game introduced us to those rules in a very friendly way. In fact, I think the entire rulebook, there is like there's a glossary included in the game, but everything else, the scenarios and all the stuff that you need to learn along the way, is told to you throughout this entire guide. So the entire guide for every scenario includes the tutorial, and every game feels a little bit like a tutorial because it's reminding you of things that you need to remember. It's telling you and reminding you of the new rules for that scenario. It's all there in that guide. It's not a separate place that you need to look for. It's all there in that one place. And I think that was really, really clever. I tried to find it online, but all I could find was the glossary. I couldn't find the tutorial rulebook for Mechs vs. Minions. I don't know if they've avoided putting it online or something like that, but I wanted to look at it again because it's such a great tutorial. But if you have a copy, if you have access to a copy, I would highly recommend studying that tutorial if you're creating a tutorial for your game. I guess I'll close by saying that this has been on my mind a lot lately because I am designing a game right now that I want players to have this experience of opening the box and just starting to play. And a lot of that is due to the Sleeping Gods element of discovery. There's a lot that players don't need to know right away, and I don't want to tell them that these things exist because it is a spoiler. My plan is to include a tutorial guide that pairs with some cards in the game. The rules won't be on the cards, but the cards are things that you will do at the beginning of the game, and probably at the beginning of every game. It won't be a tutorial, but certain thematic things that you need to do at the beginning of the game, and the guide will walk you through those things. And then in addition to that, there will be just a full rule book that you can reference whenever you need to. So if you encounter a new thing for the first time, you can very easily find it in that rule book. And it's been kind of fun designing the tutorial as I design the game. So it's not something that I'm holding off until after I've designed the game to create. I'm designing it as part of the experience of playing the game, that's been interesting to do. And so tutorials have been on my mind a lot lately, and trying to get better at making a tutorial, and hence why I've been studying them, hence why I've been thinking about them, and hence why I'd love your recommendations. If you can think of any other games, whether they're games that I mentioned, I'd love to hear more detail about how it actually worked. But if you have any games that you recommend that have fantastic tutorials where you can literally just open the box and start playing and it teaches you how you go, I'd love to hear what those games are and why you found that method, what you found worked and what you found that didn't work that could be improved if they made a tweak to the tutorial. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks.